Public comment would be welcome when the hearing is declared open. For anybody addressing the commission, approach the podium, give us your first and last name and your complete physical address. Comment should be limited to 3 minutes. All right, roll call.
Ms. Quetch?
Here.
Mr. Johnson? Mr. Weaver? Mr. Pennington?
Present.
Mr. Sproles?
Here.
Mr. Wilson?
Here.
And Mr. Schuman?
Here. We have a quorum.
We do.
Next order of business will be approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of May 23rd, 2022. Are there any, Mr. Weaver, are there any additions or corrections to the minutes as submitted? If not, is there a motion that the minutes be approved as submitted?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, Ms. Quetch, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Pennington, any additional discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, next order of business is public comment. Have 3 people signed up to make public comment. The first is Greg Lilly. Mr. Lilly, you submitted a written comment, did you not?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I assume those would be the written comment. You're welcome to make additional comment, but the written comment would be part of the minutes. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's in your packet.
Okay. Just wanted you to be sure you knew that.
Yes, I'm Greg Lilly at 244 Valley Street Northeast. And I'm here to talk about the sign ordinance of the additional part where we're talking about billboards. And that was part of my written. But what I want to talk about is, we know that off-premise signs are prohibited, but they have been grandfathered in. And in 2171, it says non-conforming signs, which billboards are, shall not be enlarged, nor shall any feature of a non-conforming sign be increased. And what I'm seeing now is a new possible change to the code that would allow non-conforming billboards as of 2022 may be altered with the approval of a special use permit. So I'm just wondering why we have that loophole. The comprehensive plan that we did in 2020 says West Main Street is an entrance corridor, and these streets are the first impression of Abington. Entrance corridors should be improved to provide a fitting welcome to the town. I don't think a digital billboard is a fitting entrance to our town. Secondly, I think it's, the issue is with a billboard, there is no stopping there, there's no traffic light, there's nothing, everybody's driving 35 miles an hour. And the sole purpose of a billboard or a digital billboard is to take the driver's eyes off the road and to the billboard. So I think that's a huge safety issue. So I encourage the commission to not add the new code and stick with what we've already got. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lilly. Next on the list is Brad Doris.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Brad Doris. I live at 244 Valley Street here in Abington. I'm here today to voice my opposition to the proposed amendment to the existing off-site signage ordinance. Appropriate sign ordinances are vital to maintaining the charm and character of any community, which is why the existing ordinance exists. Amending the ordinance will dilute it, and it will diminish the good faith efforts many of our fellow citizens and business owners are doing every day to make Abington a better community. I believe the existing ordinance is worthy. As such, it should be actively defended, not amended. Please do not support the proposed amendment. Let's all row together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Doris. Next is Ashley, and I cannot read the last name, so.
Gasberry.
She's part of the applicant as,
I am.
for the Lamar Group, so
Oh,
you might
okay.
wanna just wait
Do you
until we
wanna
get.
wait till
Okay,
after?
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anybody else that wants to address the commission for public comment that hasn't signed up? If not, we'll move on to the certificate of appropriateness. Certificate of appropriateness, Doug Superwash, Turnhart Acquisition Corporation, 2506 South Front Street, Richlands, Virginia, 24641. Owner memo for exterior material change located at 140 Cook Street Avenue, Virginia, tax map, parentheses, 021-8-9A, in parentheses. Staff report.
All right, good evening. You all have seen this a few times now, so I won't go into it too in-depth, but I will put a little bit of information on the record for the public. Turnhart Acquisition Corporation and Jeremy Fields with the Appalachia Design Services requested approval of a certificate of appropriateness for a new commercial car wash. At the time, you all, as the Planning Commission, approved the certificate of appropriateness as they had presented it. I put the original renderings here in the application, and you can see on the screen. They came back at our previous meeting in May asking for some changes. Primarily, what they were looking for in changes is rather than having a brick facade with the glass and the trim being in red, they requested that there be a cement board facade for the brick, and then they asked that that be painted, that the whole entire structure be painted red. So at that meeting, you all rejected that request, and they have proposed a new red color, and that is what you all are here tonight to look at. I will say that for the public, how did we get here? This property is in the Meadows Planned Unit Development. That's where Food City and the sports complex are organized. These lots, as part of that approved PUD, have a design standard requirement in them that send each and every owner, when they're constructing a project, to the Planning Commission for a COA. And COAs traditionally are actually only for the entrance corridor, the parcels that are actually touching the entrance corridor. While the PUD at that time, the whole thing touched Cumming Street, and so basically you all have become the protector of the entrance corridor, and each of the topics, honestly, tonight, including the nail bar, are inside that development. So it is up to you to make sure that it complies with the standards that are in the agreement between the town and the PUD, as well as the standards that are in the generalized overlay district. So the design standards in the PUD language say a minimum of 50% of first floor, front and side exterior building elevations, excluding glass, that are visible from the public right-of-way shall be comprised from the following materials: natural clay, brick, and/or natural quarry stone products. Secondary facade materials which may be used for up to 40% on exterior building walls include hard coat, stucco, concrete materials, synthetic stucco, fiber cement siding, and/or materials approved by the planning department. Painted smooth face concrete block, wood, architectural metal, and other materials differing from those used as primary and secondary materials may be utilized in an amount not to exceed 10%. So it's basically looking for a couple of changes in materials so that it's not just, one static line of materials. That's in the piece that is in the PUD. And then in the section that we're talking about design review guidelines for the entrance corridor, in there we get sort of an addition. So it says new buildings should include one or a combination of the following: wood frame or fiber cement board with brick, stone, or concrete foundations, brick construction or brick facing, finished concrete block, roof materials of standing seam, metal, asphalt shingle, and rubber membrane. Site materials shall be limited to local stone, asphalt, concrete, and exposed aggregate. And 8, facade colors preferably shall be of a low reflectant white, earth tone, muted, subtle, or neutral colors. Building trim may reflect a brighter color as an accent material. The use of high-intensity metallic fluorescent day glow or neon colors are discouraged. So that's basically how we get here to y'all deciding, you know, whether or not the red color that they're asking for would be allowed on the full structure, and then subsequently the fiber cement board is not something that you all approved last time, so they did not bring that back as a request. This red is slightly different from the previous red, but you are still making a decision on whether or not you're looking at this color on the full structure. So they are here to answer any questions. If you have any questions for me, I can take those at this time.
I guess my question would be, we approved the brick the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And the brick that we approved the first time matches all the other buildings that are close to this building.
Correct.
So, you know, personally, I can't see any reason to make any change. Does anybody else have questions for them or comments?
This is just the color change, correct?
Well, it's a color change, and then also they're asking that the entire structure be painted.
Be painted,
red.
okay.
Mhm. And they are here if you want to hear them present.
If they want to speak to this, they're certainly welcome to.
I still don't believe it would meet the guidelines, the color.
So, Jeremy Fields, Appalachia Design, 245 Birch Street, Blackville, Tennessee. Here on behalf of Turner to request that the brick be painted red. It is a brick, individual piece, you know, mortar, brick and mortar. So we are proposing that as it's shown, and then we're asking that it be painted red to match his color of trademark. He has one building right now. He's planning several in the, you know, Tri-Cities, you know, and beyond, and his trademark is a red building. I think y'all know what's going on. Car washes are kind of blowing up. They're going in everywhere, and so in order to attract your customers to your buildings, you need to have that trademark of, you know, something to draw them, much like Pal's is blue, and, you know, they requested that their building be blue because of trademark. So this is Doug's trademark to be red.
Is the grout going to be white?
No, you'll lay the brick and then you'll paint it completely.
But what, like when you're laying it, what would the grout be if it's left like it is, the color?
Like if it's not painted, or
Right.
Probably red, match the, you know, he wants it a monotone, you know, but you know, it's really needs to be red. You can't buy a red brick. You know, bricks are, you know, kind of earth tones. They've got, you know, you can't get red. So you see the red on the top of the building, that's essentially the color that he wants the entire building.
I mean, can the bricks be laid in a red color with red mortar?
So red's very broad, you know, so you know, to buy, you can't buy, like, you know, let's say the American flag red, you can't buy that bright of a red. You know, it's going to be a brownish red. And then, yes, you could get a mortar that would match that color. And that's what we would typically do if he would not have a trademark.
Okay.
Other questions? Anything else you want to add to that? Okay. All right, what's the pleasure of the commission? Of course, we have one approval of the original design.
Yeah.
So I think you got two alternatives. One is to stay with what we had, or the other, depending on what you want to do, is to approve the painted red, so whatever.
Well, I
There's a
would like
motion.
to stay with the original.
Okay, is that a motion?
Yes, it's a
Okay.
motion.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
Okay. Additional discussion? Additional questions? If not, Ms. Rice, would you call the roll?
Ms. Quetch,
Aye.
Mr. Weaver,
Aye.
Mr. Pennington,
Aye.
Mr. Sproles,
Aye.
Mr. Wilson,
Aye.
and Mr. Schuman.
Aye. Thank you. All right. Next order of business is, certificate of appropriateness, ombre nail bar, 113 Cook Street, Abingdon, Virginia, 24210. Owner, Brianna Olivera, Bristol Sign Company, Walden, LLC, representative, located at 113 Cook Street, Abingdon, Virginia, 24210. Tax map, parentheses, 021-8-2, in parentheses. Staff report.
And actually, we're gonna have Gabe do this one.
Okay. And you sent out an amended,
Yep, yeah, so it should all just be the white
Okay.
acrylic. And then,
And Gabe, can I just clarify, this is the correct one?
That
I
is the
have?
correct one,
Okay.
yes.
yeah, okay.
And that should all be in your packets as well. So the request is Aubrey Nails Bar owner and Brianna Olivera of Bristol Sign Company, Walden LLC, representative, have requested approval of a certificate of appropriateness for a new wall sign and black vinyl lettering attached to an existing open face on the tenant monument sign structure located at one of the entrances to the shopping plaza, located at 113 Cook Street, Abingdon, parcel 021-8-2. The proposed wall sign will consist of channel letters mounted on a raceway and be internally lit using 120-volt white LED lighting modules. The property is within the general business district and is under the Meadows restrictive covenants and reciprocal access easement agreement. So as Mayana mentioned, this is in the whole Meadows complex, so this is why it comes under this, and it's a COA. Staff findings, the proposed wall sign will be one set of 24-inch channel letters, and that will be the ombre, mounted on a 7-inch raceway. One set of 16-inch channel letters, that will be Nails Bar, mounted on a 4-inch raceway. Both sets of lettering will have black returns, black trim caps, have white acrylic plex faces, and be eternally lit. Illumination of the sign will consist of 120-volt white LED lighting modules. The total square footage of the proposed wall sign is 18.98 square feet. The total length of the primary elevation is roughly 33.1 feet, making the allowable square footage 62 square feet. The square footage for the proposed wall sign meets both the Meadows restrictive covenants and reciprocal access easement agreement and section 2-A-3 of Abingdon's general sign standards. For Meadows restrictive covenants, in section 2, permitted sign specifications and approval processes. For wall signs include any signage or on structures and or buildings, whether leased or owned. In the third option, it says primary front elevation, each tenant/owner shall be permitted one or more signs. Up to 2 square feet of wall sign area shall be allowed for each horizontal linear foot of exterior wall length. If an exterior wall length is less than 20 feet, the maximum allowable sign area on that wall shall be 40 square feet. And I just put the kind of our table for the sign dimensions in your packet, as you can see. And highlighted the box where it just says wall, just this way you can see which one it is. Additionally, the type of lettering used and the method of illuminating the proposed wall sign meets the required/appropriate means outlined in the Meadows restrictive covenants and reciprocal access easement agreement, stating all signs should be channel letters or a similar application. The use of LED lighting is encouraged. There will be 2 signs, black vinyl lettering attached to the existing tenant panels found on the existing tenant monument structure at the entrance into the plaza. And that is it. If you have any questions, I can stand by. If not, you can have the applicant come up.
Any questions for Gabe? Is there anybody else here who wants to address this issue?
I'm Lisa Walden, if you have any questions.
Anybody have any questions? Is there a motion? It appears that it passes muster for all the requirements, so.
I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
Okay, Mr. Pennington, is there a second? Second. Mr. Weaver, any additional discussion? If not, all those, go ahead and call the roll, I guess that's good.
Ms. Bryant?
Aye.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Pennington?
Aye.
Mr. Sproles?
Aye.
Mr. Wilson?
Aye.
And Mr. Shannon?
All right, next order of business is zoning code article 21 signs discussion. I think everybody has been furnished the draft of the sign ordinance suggestions. One question I have is when we're talking about the signs, particularly the digital signs, that's been a discussion, but as far as I know, there's been no action taken on that. I know not here, has the council done anything with that at all yet?
No, so basically, I'll just, if you're okay with it, I'll kind of give a history of how we got here and then we can move
Sure.
forward. So I would say, in 2021, the Lamar Sign Company, came to staff and said, is there a possibility of doing digital billboards? We looked at the code with them, looked at the code with our attorney and said, no, off-premise signage, isn't something that's allowed. And so, we said the only way that you could come through this process is if there was an actual text amendment. Meanwhile, we've had quite a few struggles with the sign code. In the last year, there's just a lot of things that are tough for us to regulate based on the way it's written. And so we said, well, if we're gonna look at one item, we might as well look at the whole thing because it all is really interconnected. So we started working on that, brought the item for the Lamar Group here to you all. You said, we're not necessarily opposed to it, we need to see a presentation. They brought you a presentation. At that stage, there was a concern, I think two primary questions. One, did the community want it? So would we hear from any constituents? And two, is there a possibility that if we do this, we're gonna expand and get more billboards throughout town and more digital ones? And so you said, can we talk to, our attorney and see what the town council, wants? So, we have a town council member with us, but hopefully she'll agree that we took it to the town council. And at that stage, they said, okay, that's interesting, bring us a presentation. The Lamar Group brought them a presentation, and they said, okay, well, we're not entirely sure. There was kind of a split amongst them, and they said, okay, well, take language back to the planning commission. So it's the proper order is for you all to either approve or deny, in your recommendation moving forward. Tonight, though, is really a little more about workshopping it because the language isn't complete for everything. You might have suggestions, comments, you might say strike through pieces of this. And so tonight, what I'd like to do is just kind of go through the sign code and then have the Lamar Group speak on the topic of the signs. See if you have any more public comment, I guess, after that. And then I'm looking for a direction from you all to send staff back to say, edit this so you can actually come to us with a resolution. So, I know you've seen it quite a bit, but it does take time for us to get through this process, and that's appropriate. I mean, it should take as much time as it needs to get to where we really wanna be. So if you would find it appropriate, I mean, I would like to kind of just go through the sign code, and I know that there are some specific, comments regarding the billboard section, but we might find that there are other comments after we're through, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay.
I think that's.
Appropriate.
Mhm.
Okay. So my first comment in here was honestly pretty simple. It was the Historic Preservation Board instead of the Board of Architectural review. We've had a lot of, comments about, there's no mention right now that temporary signage, is it allowed, is it not allowed in the historic district? And so, just laid it out here that temporary signage also has to be approved by the HPRB. What was very interesting in here, and I know we all talked about this before, you all were very specific with me saying that you wanted to approve a lot of the things, you know, that are in this code. And there was a line in here that said, that if there were signs in the entrance corridor and they conformed with the zoning district, we didn't have to send them through a certificate of appropriateness. So, I'm bringing that back to you all because as far as I could tell, the last time we talked, you said this is part of our role and we wanna keep doing it. We want to review the signs in the entrance corridor. So, I've seen some nodding of heads, and so I think that that's where, we need to go. This was kind of modified, it used to say the fee schedule was adopted by the town council, but really the fee schedule is actually approved by the town manager, so I just wanted to make sure that piece was updated, pretty simple. When we get over to page 3, I did add some language. One of the things that we have, talked about quite a bit with, I guess it's part of the capital improvements plan, is really looking at a master sign plan for the whole town. So I don't know how many of you have maybe been to Kingsport and some other places where you come off the interstate, they have signs that are directing you to kind of those primary locations that might be the hospital or other, items. And so we wanted to put in here, a reference to things that you might not think have town signage on them, but actually do. And one of them is the creeper trail, making sure that the creeper trail signage is allowed and that we know that that's, you know, that the town is working on that signage. The second item in here is wayfinding signage, and that's really, that allows the town to not have to go through, that allows the town to go through a master wayfinding sign. Go ahead, jump in at any
Yeah,
point.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
on that, well, one thing, it says, under the creeper trail, you've got roadway and safety signage, ensure that road
Oh, I see
signs
that.
are.
I see that.
But,
Yeah.
some time ago, there was, action by the planning commission, and I really wish
Okay.
I've gotten to where I've been around too long, so I can't remember when it was. But what was done was, there was a division of the town into, I wanna say, 7
Yeah.
areas. And within those 7 areas, the idea would be that, there would be wayfinding signs within those areas. And for example, one of them was where the schools are, it's called the Falcon area. So it
okay.
would point out where the stadiums were, where the ball fields were, that type of thing. Then there was a theater district and wayfinding signs within those districts. And at the time, I personally thought that was a good idea. Some time ago, there were signs in town where they were directed, but they were basically paper signs within, on poles, but,
Okay.
and they weren't, unlike Kingsport, which is really well done, these were very hard to use, but I did think that it would be worth exploring, going back and looking at those districts and looking at wayfinding signs within the district, because the districts made some sense. So if you
Yeah.
came into town and you saw the theater district, you would think that it would be near the Barter, Falcon district, near the ball fields, that type of thing. So I just think
Yeah.
that's worth looking at again.
Definitely, and I heard about that plan, I haven't necessarily found it, but, we'll see, but, yeah, I definitely heard about that, so that's where it kinda stemmed out of, was this idea that, to sort of unify the signs, and really, it kinda came up in a conversation when we first started looking at, the new visitor center, and then the new, signs out, at the ball fields, that we started saying, well, wouldn't it be great if all of our signs had a real uniform feel, colors, like you're saying, like maybe there's certain colors that are for tourist attractions and certain colors that are for certain districts. So, so I basically added that as language so that when we get to that point, we're essentially allowed to do that, and it doesn't cause a problem. That's, I don't know when we'll have the budget to get it done, but we did add it to the capital improvements, plan, so hopefully in the next few years.
I was gonna say the wayfinding right now is pretty bad. We were out working on the stairs for the pedestrian bridge out at the downtown there that go over the tracks. And we're there like 3 days in a row, and I can't tell you how many people stop and say, "Where's the creeper trail?"
Mhm.
There's really no
Right,
sign that,
exactly.
Yeah, well, and I would say the same thing. I can't tell you, man, living on Valley, how many people stop and say, where's the ball fields?
Yep,
Mm-hmm.
yep, yep.
Yeah, so that's one, like, we see that as a big issue. The other thing too is we've done an inventory of all the, what I would call extra signs. So if you think about it, as you're coming into town, in some of our medians and areas, we'll have like 6 or 7 signs for sort of like, that all say different things. And so the idea behind a plan is that you consolidate signs. So it doesn't have to say barter, theater, historic, it can say, it can have more things, so it's safer for those people who are driving. So this, adding it to the code really honestly just legitimizes the fact that the town wants to do that plan, so. We scratched through a few of the, signs here. This is all under signs that are exempt. We scratched through quite a few of these signs because right now, the way that we have, signs, basically, we're struggling with temporary signs. They used to say they were here for 30 consecutive days. 30 consecutive days from what? Basically, anybody could come, put up a sign. If I went out there and said, I think it's been up there for 30 days, they would say, well, I just put a new one out yesterday. So we scratched through a few of these things because there's not a way to enforce them. And without having a way to enforce your code,
You got no code.
You got no code. So either you just allow them all to be there, or you figure out a way to enforce them. So we took them out of the exempt signs. We're not eliminating them. We're just saying you need to get a permit for a temporary sign. And so you can see that we added a few things like political signs.
So the temporary sign is not really temporary, is that what you're saying?
It's temporary for 30 days.
Okay.
Yes. But right now, we've basically got them being temporary permanent,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Okay, so we're gonna enforce that then?
Correct.
The 30 days, okay.
And it's kind of tough because if you look down the street, one of the things, those pennants, I mean, there's a few in town that are just flapping in the wind.
And some of them you can tell are very old.
Very old, and it really, while on the one hand, you want to make sure that people are allowed to advertise their business, on the other hand, you want to make sure that we're keeping things up to date. And, upkeep of signage is a big, big piece of this. Our code enforcement department does spend a lot of time taking signs out of the right of way. Because again, if you come to an intersection that's just full of signs, it's hard for a driver to focus on the direction, and there's just a lot of ease and.
That's a safety issue too.
Exactly,
Yes.
yeah. So, we do spend a lot of time doing that. Go ahead.
I was gonna say on item 5,
Mhm.
previous page,
Oh, yeah.
that we might audit where it says, signs displayed on operable truck, bus, or other vehicle, we should, put trailer in there,
Okay,
since we have trailer signs all over the place.
okay, yeah.
Well, we've been fighting, or trying to fight, that one,
Mhm.
out on, beside Bella's there for, how many years has that been
Mhm.
discussed?
It's just growing too. It's getting larger, it's growing.
Yeah.
Mhm. That is really tough, so, so we'll get under the prohibited signs, and this is gonna go a little bit off the script that's in your packet, because our new town manager, who is, graciously here in the audience tonight, Mr. Cochran has been working a little bit with us on, expanding some of the, types of signs that we do allow. So, right now, basically, we're saying signs or banners that are within or across public right-of-ways they're not allowed. I think we all went through that and went through that experience of no longer having a banner sign that stretches across the road. Well, one of the types of signs that we had a request for, and I think you all probably remember, was Sinking Springs Church wanted to put flag signs up on the flag poles. And we do have that infrastructure. We have had quite a few people really interested in putting more signage up when it comes to town-sponsored events. So specifically, you know, the town is either providing money or participating in some way in a sponsored event. And so there is a request, and Mr. Cochran and I are working on language that we would bring essentially to the next meeting when we get to a stage where we're gonna actually adopt this as a resolution that would allow some signage, on public poles, and specifically I would call them the light poles. So that came to you all. It was just kind of part of a discussion. It went to town council. We talked about it there, but it was just a public comment, and then there's been additional information. So we're gonna stand by on that a little bit. We're not quite ready to present it, but there has been some forward movement in saying, hey, if it's a town-sponsored event, can we have more signage? And maybe in appropriate places, if that makes sense. Like, it can't be across everybody's front yards. It can't be up and down with the little poles or little snipe signs in the right-of-way, but really having a designated location. And so that is something we're talking about internally at this time. So I just wanted to let you all know. As you know, I try to work up to these things, let you know they're coming, and then provide some information. So, so if we continue on, we didn't do a whole lot. I did this language on H, which we're kind of discussing tonight a little bit. It said off-site signs unless specifically permitted by this chapter. And I cannot tell you how many people I have had ask for, that don't have businesses on Main Street, say, well, if off-site signs aren't allowed, why can't I put my sign up on the town's sidewalk in the front if I'm off of, you know, Wall Street or something like that? And they said, what does this mean unless specifically permitted by this chapter? So I'm kind of scratching that through and rephrasing it. You know, we're just saying off-premise signage is prohibited, plain and simple. And so that was one of the edits. The other thing that we're saying is prohibited is signs in individual yards advertising business or events that are off premise. So we've had a lot of that. Well, if I can't put my sign in the right of way, then I'm gonna go talk to, you know, this person and ask them if I can put the sign in their yard. Again, that's not allowed. It's just not really specific in this language. So we decided to add that so that people would know that you cannot advertise business or events in other people's yards. That's off-premise signage.
Let me ask a specific question. Every year at Cumming Street in Maine, they got the Win This Car at the fair. Would that be prohibited then?
It is right now. So
Because
right
that
now,
might
it's
cause a little
basically,
bit of ruckus.
yep. And so that's kind of the goal, and the goal that Mr. Cochran and I have been discussing is, are we able to have some sort of other public signage availability? Now, if they were to win that car, and it's like, let's say the radio station was sitting on that corner, and they wanted to put out a sign for an event of theirs, then by all means, they could. But just the idea that it's in a private, like a private front yard, isn't appropriate. So, it's open, it's not my code. If you all think that, there's other flexibilities you want, we can discuss them. It just gets real tough, to allow certain events, even if it's events on a list, to have some flexibility and not all events.
The key is being consistent.
Correct.
Well, and if you do the wayfinding signs, the way, you're talking about, you have the ability to say, for example, here are the restaurants, here are whatever it is, and you can use your wayfinding signs so that somebody couldn't say, well, I've got my restaurant on Wall Street and nobody can see it from Maine. If your wayfinding signs are done appropriately, then they at least would know that there are other restaurants available.
And we've definitely been looking at the type of wayfinding sign where you could slide slide a piece of information in, so, a person could essentially, because obviously sadly, we don't know which businesses will stay and which
Right.
ones will go over the years, so we're looking at ones that are interchangeable, so you could slide in a restaurant's name, and then if for some reason it's no longer in business, you could take it out. So we put some money for an actual study, in the capital improvements, plan, because it's not gonna be just us, deciding. It definitely needs to be very, done really, I guess uniformly and based on the way other people have done it. So right now, I don't know if you wanted to you wanna talk anything more about it? Signs in front yards, or? It's painful, believe me. I've dealt with a few signs so far and people asking for signage and right-of-ways, and the thing that I have told everybody is, these are events that I wanna go to myself. I'm not immune. It's not as if we're sitting here and saying, that we're not interested in the events. It's just really tough to allow signage without allowing all signage, so.
The, putting like individual businesses on a sign is a problem. I was on the Believe in Bristol
Okay.
Design Committee, and I think 6th Street, they wanted to sign to show everybody down there. Well, as soon as word got out, every single business in the city, well, how come we don't have a sign? And all of a sudden, you'd have 200 signs on the street, so it could open a can of worms.
It's definitely complex, and you might have to say like historic restaurant district and then
Yes.
downtown restaurant
Yeah.
district, and you might have to make it a little more general and pointing, shops and restaurants of Wall Street. You might, and it kinda goes back to your idea about, districts and that type of thing, so.
Yeah, and in the districts that they talked about, there was enough in the name of the district to say where it might be. Like, again, the theater district,
Right.
the Falcon district, you would start off by knowing the general location. You could go from there. But, I think, it's something that really has to be done because, when people get off the interstate and they can't find the Meadows, that's not a good thing.
Right.
Yes, that was,
Well, see, it doesn't, with GPS,
Mhm.
it takes a long time for GPS to catch up or to stop doing something. My office was at the old clinic building after the hospital had moved out to past exit 19. 3 years after that, people were showing up at the clinic building looking for doctors because they had it on their GPS. So it takes time for GPS to kick in.
Yeah, and we definitely, I think right at that intersection, when you come off the interstate, that's one of the places that we all specifically talked about, was making sure that there is a right-hand turn for the ball fields, making sure there's a right-hand turn for the creeper trail, and then, basically on Sinking Springs Road, making sure there's a left-hand turn to go to the creeper trail. So, definitely will be part of a larger sign plan. So, let's see. One thing I wanted to say under the standards is just to make sure that support elements, do contribute to the height of the structure. We've had several comments as to whether or not signs that end up sort of down in a hole, if they're down a hill, like, how high is my sign? Yep, the support structure does contribute to the height. Let's see. The light emitted from changeable signs. This was added here so that we could talk a little bit more about the changeable signs. That's on page 7. And then we got into the temporary signs. So again, it wasn't really that we eliminated them. We're just now saying that you have to have a permit for them. So if you come in and you want a permit for 30 days, we need to start and stop you, on those 30 days. And without it, we don't have the ability to do that. So 21-5-8, that's on page 8, which is, page 8 and then the top of page 9. This is this billboard section. So rather than trying to mix it in with the non-conforming sign code, and again, you all might tonight say absolutely not, we don't want a billboard code. And that, that's fine, staff will go with whatever your direction is. But what we tried to do here is put in language that reflected the interests of the Lomar Company, and then also, things that we had heard from everybody. So, we said no new billboards are allowed to be constructed within the town limits of Abington, so it wouldn't allow for new, billboards. Non-conforming billboards as of 2022 may be altered with the approval of a special use permit. So that means that they would be required to go through you as the planning commission and town council for any one that they'd like to change. The minimum standards for that alteration would be that alterations would only take place in the B2 zoning sub-district, which Gabe graciously went out and did a drive-through town through the B2 district and put together all of the signs that are actually in the B2 district, which you should all have. So there was about 7 locations that have billboards in the B2 district. The rest of these requirements, like the billboard's not located closer than 500 feet of another billboard, was to make sure that you didn't have multiple billboards on one parcel of land that could even be converted to digital. The 35 feet high, I think they explained that in their presentation, why they want such a high sign. Also, multiple digital billboards were not allowed on one parcel. And then we said, and this was a part about no replacement sign should be expanded in size, permitted to be placed on top or under an existing billboard or beside an existing billboard. So you couldn't keep the existing one and say, hey, I'm also gonna add a digital one on top of that. All existing billboard replacement with a digital or automatic changeable message. May include a digital sign face for 100% of the coverage. The seconds here where it says they should not change every 12 seconds. We had that in the changeable sign language, so I was keeping with that same 12 seconds. The Lamar group has requested that actually be 8. And then the same thing for the last thing, I was using the same 3/10 of a foot candle of ambient light, because that was based on what we had talked about, or what we already had for the, in the other section that I just discussed. So, this is what we're proposed. Now, we don't have to talk about it right this second. You guys can come to it with it, in your discussion, but, basically taking what they provided, taking sort of a back and forth, where nobody had said no yet, nobody had completely said yes yet, and putting it into this fashion. So tonight would be the night if you said no, absolutely not, or yes, but we'd like to see some differences here. So I don't know if you want to discuss it now or
Well,
wait.
I'll just throw this out there. Since this started, I've got calls and texts, and I'm finding out that people don't want the lighted billboards. That's the only ones calling me, is the ones that don't want it. I haven't nobody's called me and said, yes, I want it, it's just the ones that don't want it. So, my constituents are saying no.
Are you asking for our opinions or actual motion on it?
At this point, I'd like to just have a discussion, because there's not really a motion tonight. Tonight I'm getting all of your input and then coming back with or without it, basically.
I'm 99% against electronic billboards. So.
Okay?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I concur with what Mr. Lilly said earlier, and I concur with what his written comments were.
Okay.
One person says, they're great on the interstates, but not in town, so.
Okay.
I'm probably not as strongly against them as, but I think, you know, if you're looking at saying no new billboards in the town, the ones that are here now are probably going to become more of eyesores as they basically fall and rot down till we get rid of them. But to replace with the digital, I would be against, I think.
Okay.
Well, now, one of the things, if you wanted to address the issue you just raised, is, you know, is some language to say that if a billboard becomes whatever term, dilapidated or whatever term you want, then it either has to be upgraded to where it was or it has to be removed. That way you would have some power not to have, you know, billboards, you know, become eyesores. And I mean, I think something like that would be appropriate.
This is outside the town limits, but on Stone Mill Road, there's a billboard that if you look at it long enough, you can figure out that it used to be a Stuckey's billboard. But it's badly deteriorated. Of course, if it were in the town, we could do something about it, but we'd have to be able to define deteriorate. Because that's gonna be deteriorated till the billboard manufacturer or producer is gonna be different than what we might think.
Well, I think you just have to talk about the structural integrity or something, maybe.
Well, the poles for this sign that I'm referring to are still pretty good. It's the sign face that has deteriorated.
I'm sure there's probably language, some definition, but I think Scott has a point. You've got two issues. One is the structural integrity of the sign, the other is the readability of it, and you probably have to address both.
The way the ordinance is now, are they allowed to be restored to their original condition as the design?
Essentially, they could continue, as long as they put a new face on it, they can continue. What they can't do is increase in size, they can't increase in illumination, they can't increase in height, we can't move them. So wherever they are at this time, they can continue putting new faces on them. I think that those poles traditionally I've seen some pretty, you know, old billboards, because this is a trend across the country, is to eliminate them inside town limits. So yeah, you know, there's been situations in the past where you think, oh, this is completely dilapidated, and suddenly there's a new billboard up on it, and maybe a new company purchased it or that nature. So they aren't. It's not as if you're taking them away. You just aren't allowing this increase. So I'm getting a kind of a different vibe tonight, I think, than I did when we continued moving forward with it. So at this time, it would sound like you would not want and be supportive of billboard language for increasing the size, height, or digital.
I think we've heard the presentations,
Okay.
and I mean, I think people who have spoken have all heard the presentations and listened to them and given some thought.
Okay. Well, and you can definitely talk, we can definitely have them come up and present, but let's just keep going through and then we can come back to that. So we went through and talked a little bit about the signs that were in each of the districts. So we had these tables in here. And again, they were kind of tough because, you know, it was like minor signs, number not limited, 3 square feet. So it was tough, because what residential use can you have an unlimited number of 3 square foot minor signs? So just kind of dealing with these tables took a lot of the stuff out. You can see that it's not that you can't have signs in the residential district, but took that entire table out and instead said neighborhood or subdivision entrance signage, identified neighborhoods and subdivisions, identified neighborhoods and subdivisions may have an identifying sign located at the entrance. Total square feet, footage of 50 square feet, total height not to exceed 4 feet. Flags on residential properties are exempt signs. Individual residential properties may not advertise for businesses or events not located on their property. For existing non-conforming businesses within the residential district, the standard for B and M districts shall be followed. So basically saying if there is an existing business, we're not taking away their signage in the residential districts. And then finally, for any home occupations, they shall have a sign no larger than 4 square feet.
One thing, and I don't know if
Yeah.
it goes here, but it was a comment that I made.
Yep, I saw
On the rest of the
Airbnbs,
plan had to
yeah.
do with short-term rentals,
Mhm.
because there was said there would be no signs for short-term rentals. I feel like we might say a small sign or
Yeah.
limit, but there are those in the OH district, and the
Mhm.
ones that I've seen are nice, they're appropriate. It seems to me that that would help somebody who's driving along saying, you know, okay, if I'm gonna stay at Taylor's Lodging, or
Right.
I know where it is, so
Okay.
it just seemed to me that, I didn't know why it was prohibited in the ordinance, but it seemed to me that it would be appropriate to have that. Now, in the OH district, they would have to be approved,
Mhm. Correct.
but, you know,
And we definitely can put that in, each one of the districts could have that as an item. So we could have short-term rental signage in each of the districts.
I mean, it just, I don't know why it was prohibited, but it,
Okay. Did you wanna add something here? And then in the OH district, we just added, temporary signage is not allowed without HPRB approval, because we get that question a lot. And then sandwich board signs are allowed without HPRB approval. So sandwich board, those little A-frame ones, those go through a permitting process to be out on the sidewalk in general. So, that's a little different, than the temporary signage. And that's pretty much it. Again, there is some language that we'll be bringing you back that talks about billboards, about banner signs and pole signs and designated signage, but we're still working on that a little bit, so. With that, I don't know if you wanna ask or discuss anything else with me, or if you'd like to talk to the Lamar group, since that billboard section really, that came from them, so.
Well, I guess I'm of the opinion that I don't wanna waste their time.
Okay.
I don't, the vibe I'm getting here is that we don't want billboards. So, just don't tease them.
I mean, I think we've heard a presentation, and I appreciate them being here and the time they've spent. I think, like Mr. Weaver, we seem to be of one mind,
You know,
pretty much.
what are they gonna say to make me go, oh, yeah, let's do it?
Everybody feel comfortable with the other changes that we're proposing? If I bring it back as a resolution? Okay. We'll do that at the next meeting then. We'll bring back a resolution for adoption, and then that goes on to the town council. And ultimately, it may be that we can put, depending on which direction we go, we're not in like a necessary rush. We just did it as a separate item because we had a specific request.
Should we have a public hearing?
That will happen at the next one, yep. So you'll have a public hearing,
Okay.
you'll have a resolution for the sign and a recommendation, and we'll go through that process. But
Did
today's
I
kinda
miss
just a
the part
workshop.
about window signs, or?
I didn't do much more. You all had asked me whether or not you could regulate window signs. You can, but I wasn't really sure what that meant, so, the only thing that we still have about window signs is that, it's on page 4. It just says window signs on the interior of the window. Because as you all know, we got requests for window signs on the exterior. Like, they basically said, okay, so that means any window signage we're gonna stick it on the outside of the window, and it's just a window sign. So, any place where you get that little opening, somebody will definitely challenge us, so.
There are places in the overall ordinance
Mhm.
that prohibit window signs in specific areas.
Mhm.
One had to do with questionable
Yes.
businesses or that were of questionable origin, and there are several places where it says that they can't be there if they're advertising certain businesses. And then the other thing is, there's at least some language, I don't remember exactly where it basically says you have to be able to see in the window.
Mhm. And safety is the other issue, I think, that the window can't be, like if it's an egress window, you can't basically put a sticker over it or a sign that would prohibit it, so. Yeah, signs are very interesting. We kind of deal with them constantly, and this last week, shocking as it might seem, we have our fourth small business that is selling products for the 4 legal plants that people are allowed to grow for marijuana. It's our fourth business that's selling lights and fertilizer and soil, and we got a request whether or not they could actually have a marijuana plant on the sign. So we're in a very strange gray area right now where there's basically been a halfway approval of a substance that we're all struggling with because I sent it on to Cam and said, can you find if there's any language that says they can or can't put that on a sign? Because the freedom of speech and the laws and regulations around what you can or can't look at on a sign are very specific. So a lot of times in other communities where marijuana enabling laws have been implemented, they've added sign language that says you can't have, you can't be advertising marijuana, which is probably why people traditionally use the green cross as the sort of symbol that is used. So
And
we're always.
They're gonna be dispensaries
Yeah.
probably in the next year to 18 months, so.
Right, so we're in a sort of a funky spot right now, where you're seeing it, but signage is definitely an interesting piece to that equation, so. But, all right, sounds like you guys I've got my marching orders from you, so I'll bring this back as a resolution and we can have a public hearing on it and move forward.
Thank you.
Okay.
The next order of business is the Berkeley Group zoning code update.
Yeah, and we have our representative here, so I think what I'll do is just sort of start off by saying, hard work. Everyone has been part of this process. I know some people are newer to the commission, but there's definitely been a lot of hard work that's been put into this. And so I just wanted to go through real quickly where we are. So there was a kickoff meeting February 9th, 2021. And that's where the Berkeley Group and staff started the project. The council kicked the project off March 1st, 2021, so a little bit over a year ago. There was public engagement from March 8th to April 8th, where the Berkeley Group got feedback on priorities and what the community wanted to see in the ordinance. The Planning Commission first session you all had was April 26th, 2021, for those of you who were on at that time. That's where they talked about the original work and what would be included. Then in June 28th, you had your second second planning workshop, and that's when they brought the use matrix and definitions. They talked about consolidating the OH district. They talked about zoning district standards and then the overlay districts. Then in September of last year, right before I showed up, you did the use matrix, the OH sub-districts, zoning district standards, and overlay districts. And then I came along and kind of slowed you down. Because I said, well, let's take another look at this. I want to make sure that everybody's comfortable and that it is your zoning code. And so we worked back through it. We went back to the drawing board, and we all had a work session in January. Then the Planning Commission had their fourth work session, February 28th. And then we had another staff, work session, April 25th. That's when Nate Berg, one of our developers, presented like about the PUD language and other items. That's when we looked at the subdivision language. Then we took it to town council in May, on some of those sort of fine items where we were kind of going back and forth together. And then tonight, we're going to talk about the full draft, with the Berkeley group. So I know that over the weekend, there was a little bit of back and forth in the emails, about it being a lot. I will say that you all have spent, you know, over a year looking at each of the sections. It was probably the 273 pages all, all at once. It was definitely a heavy document, to take in at once, but, we're here tonight. Nothing, you know, nobody is in a rush to get this adopted. We just, you know, we need to go through it here about the final topics and then, see where you all wanna go from here.
One
So,
thing
yeah.
I'd say real quick is, there were questions about the marked up document,
Mhm.
but the document that we had,
Mhm.
the footnotes basically refer to the changes that the
They do.
Berkeley group has made. So if you were going to review that, and I did that, I think if you actually read this 227-page document in the space of 4 days, it means you have no life.
Well.
But the changes are noted in the footnote, so.
Yeah, and I will say that, talking a little bit about that, I didn't really wanna go back and forth in the email, but, you know, this is a rewrite. So one of the things that I find the toughest is that, unlike the sign code, which you all just adopted in 2020, it's easy for me to go in and underline and strike through because it's a small section. But this is like basically a full rewrite of your code. So, while even when I sent, you know, when we would have these discussions and I would send back the spreadsheet and say the planning commission talked about this and here's what they've decided, it didn't really necessarily lend itself to true redlining of the document. So, that doesn't, you know, that doesn't, negate anything that we, any process that you all want to take and any additional workshops, we can definitely workshop it, but, I will say that everything that we have gone over, they have definitely diligently put it in, so. With that, Rebecca, if you'd like to kick it
Yes.
off.
Hello.
Do you need is there a presentation on here that you need to?
I do have
Follow
a,
up?
a presentation. Can I plug in? How do I?
I am hoping our IT, I don't know, John, is it you back there?
No.
Aaron?
I'm the only question.
Hi, Aaron. Is she able to do a presentation here, or does she need to bring it back to you?
I should have emailed it to you when I.
That's okay. Can she do a presentation here, or does she need to hand you a?
Probably USB, I can put it into the computer.
Let me see if I have mine.
Or email it? Can she email it to you? Are you able?
Yeah, I should be able to find it.
On that? Okay. Would that just be to the IT department or to you?
You can email it to me, and Owen, and Abingdon.
Hold on a second.
I have to get on the Wi-Fi first.
Nate, it's Nate?
Yes.
Nate, this is Nate, everybody. He's our newest person.
Hey, what's the security key to get onto the Wi-Fi?
Is the security key, sorry Nate, can you,
Let me see if I can find a cable, make something work.
okay,
All right.
I'm not sure what that is, but.
I'll talk for a little bit while he's trying to figure that out, and we can do it without the presentation if we need to. No big deal. So yes, Mariana graciously went through all the work that you guys have been doing and to create this 200+ page document. And tonight, I would like to kind of talk about a couple of final things before we start moving to open house. As Mariana said, we've had lots of work sessions, talked about each article, you went back and worked through some again. And so to answer the question about the red line, that's kind of impossible at this point. It would be pretty ugly. If I, put together a red line, it would be all red line because we've restructured things and over time, made changes. So unfortunately, we can't do the red line, but that is why we did those footnotes to help kind of keep track of some of those things and some of those decisions. I can also provide you with, we've done sort of action items or, kind of pseudo minutes on our end from our meetings. So if you would like a copy of those to kind of see those items, and for you, I know you haven't been along,
No,
through
I-
this whole
no.
process. And so that might help you, see some of those items that were talked about. The other thing I'll say that we do when we get to the open house is we will also create a summary major changes document. So it is to kind of take place of that red line. And it will kind of inform the public, inform council, and remind you all about what you've done thus far and where those big changes are. And we like that document, one, because it informs the public, but also it might remind you, oh yeah, a year ago we did, talk about that. Let me go back to the text, and it'll kind of help direct you to specific things in the text so you don't have to read line by line every single page. You can go to those hot topics, the main things that you're interested in, and find those items. So that's something that we do at the open house, and I think everybody will find that beneficial. And still waiting. We'll go ahead and dive in a little bit on what we were gonna talk about. Last article, definitions. The definitions we have supplied throughout this process. So if you may recall, with each article, we supplied kind of a little section at the top of that article with definitions that matched or kind of went with and were important to the article that we were discussing. So now I've taken all of those out of those articles and put it into its own article. So it includes all of the land use terms, administration terms, the district regulation terms, all of those things. There are a few articles or sections that do have some definitions in them, like the floodplain, just because it is so specific. And in some cases, a term might mean a little something different than what it would somewhere else in the ordinance. So we do keep some of those things together and not completely with the definitions. The definitions do, on your attachment B, start on page 192, if you were curious to turn to it now. And Mayanna has worked with us. She has reviewed this in its entirety and marked it up, added comments. We've incorporated those items, and now have it back to you all to see if you have any questions. If there was a particular definition that is missing and you felt like should be defined, or maybe wasn't defined quite the way you thought it should be, let me know now, and we can discuss that and edit it.
Oh,
I don't think we can do it, I'm sorry.
Okay. Maya, did you have access to your email from there?
probably, and you don't have access to the, Wi-Fi though, is what you're saying?
No, that's right.
Sorry, Nate, is there any possibility you can come out here and figure out how to get her on the Wi-Fi so she could just email it to you? Actually, here we go, our town manager might be here to help
I
you.
have a hotspot on my phone if you wanna try that.
Cause
Okay.
I thought there was a guest access to the town's Wi-Fi with just a password that's pretty simple.
There's a TOA, Town of Abingdon guest.
There should be a guest one.
There is.
When I
think I'm
click
on
on
it
it,
right now with my
it
phone.
wants a
Password,
password.
which I don't wanna say
Yeah,
over,
as a guest.
yeah, I think there's a password for the guest as well, yeah.
And I remember when we were here, like doing work sessions, stuff,
Yeah,
it's
it
something
was
simple.
something.
It's
Yes.
like town of Abington, all, you
Right.
know.
This is the line hotspot, that'll work. If you see it as Mac 13 or something like that. If you see it,
Oh, come on.
I just can't remember what it is.
Is it the same presentation
We
as?
have.
It's the same email
Whoops.
that we have in PDF.
The what?
Her
You
presentation,
know, you
is it-
told me
isn't it
where
just
your
the
son
revised?
lives.
No, it sounds like she made a presentation, like an actual
address, and I forgot the damn
presentation. Yeah.
street she
I have
lives
some
on.
pictures I'd like to
I
show.
see.
But I got her
Otherwise, I
wedding
wouldn't
invitation in the
worry
mail
about
Thank you for
today.
your
Well,
email back
I
today,
looked
by the
up
way.
as soon as I got home
That was
there,
helpful.
that
Yeah.
bar.
I'm
I was
good
like,
to
good
go.
Lord, it's 2/10 of a mile from
Yeah.
his house. That's
And
crazy.
it's not far from Sydney. Well, I think I told you her husband to be, he's got a completed urban planning in DCU. He's not decided what he wants to do, but he's found because he did it here as a bartender, he can make pretty damn good money as a bartender in Brooklyn.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Are
sent
you
it to
sending
your
it?
email.
Can you send it to Nate's? Actually, I think it's N Owens is what he said. Is that what it is, Nate?
And Owen, no S.
No, no S.
And it's at Abington. Hyphen?
-va.gov.
Does he like where he is?
He loves it.
I was gonna say Sydney does too.
The building, he's got like, his room is small, but it's got some skylight and stuff. So it's apartment.
Yeah, see, Sydney's apartment's like 800 square feet, maybe a little more, but it's actually an apartment where she has been before, places that were modified to be. And this isn't, but the park there is
You know,
just
the ones
immense.
that's
It's,
here
it's,
now.
it's not
Some people
nearly
hate
as
'em.
big as Central, but it's huge.
But,
Yeah.
you know, they've never bothered me.
Yeah, I looked at it on
But
Street
the
View,
one that
it's
they
like
were really
looking around the area, it's
concentrating on
pretty
was the one there at Southern States,
Yeah.
or the old
And
Southern
Judy's
States.
been up there a bunch of
Or
times.
if he's trying to go get a
Where he
USB.
lives now,
Right
some
at it.
pictures.
See, I haven't been to Sydney's
So-
apartment
But it
since
was
she
gonna be
moved,
higher,
but neither is Doris.
And
It's gone.
Yeah.
but sometimes we just gotta listen to the people, you know, see what they say.
Yeah, it's their community.
Not let it be
But she
about
loves
us, let it be about the
That's what
community.
don't understand about
Thank you so
Brooklyn.
much.
It's
I
not
had one of those
high-rise.
mints and
It's
it's
neighborhoods and great little places to eat. And it's easy for because I'm sure we're gonna take five.
All right, go ahead.
That's right on the subway line
He's gonna
going
take
into
5.
Manhattan, so it's easy to get.
Oh, yeah,
Because where Sydney was, before, you had to change trains. Where she is now, you don't, it's just like.
yeah. Right.
While he's pulling that up, any definitions, questions?
I can tell you, I went through here real quick, and as an engineer, there's a lot of places where it says something like, water and sewer. But if it means sanitary sewer, it needs to say sanitary sewer,
Okay.
not just sewer. And there's a few places it does say sanitary sewer, but 90% of them, and it's in a lot of places, it just says water and sewer. And I think technically, it does need to say sanitary sewer. You have,
Is that the storm sewer?
Mm-hmm.
no, there's no such thing as a storm sewer in engineering, it's storm drain. Sanitary sewer, storm drain. That's like legally, that's how you keep them separate. So that's why I didn't want to confuse, because if somebody off the street's looking at sewer, they might be thinking of storm. Well, that's not really the case. You do say, there is storm drain listed in here, but I think sewer just needs to be better defined.
Well, that's a
We can
great
do that.
observation.
That's why he gets the big money for being on the
There
committee.
you go. I'm done.
I'm done.
Get a gold star.
Any other comments about definitions? Okay. The next item is actually why I wanted to have a presentation, so.
Well, maybe I can just say that, do you all, was there a better date out of my list for another workshop?
that Thursday of that second week, I can't do it. The only one I couldn't do.
Okay, let me see what.
So, and I would like to, Diana, let me in, that you're concerned, you've been dropped, this bomb of a document, so to speak. And, there's always, I'll say, every locality gets it and goes, oh my gosh, it's been so long, we don't even remember what we agreed to and what it says anymore. And that's common, and that's okay. And that's actually part of why we have this open house process, so that you don't have to directly move into public hearing. And so for the open house process, I would say it's for everyone. Of course, it's for the public to see what you've been working on, but that also really gives you 2 months to go through this document, see if there's anything missing, see if anything is jarring compared to, oh, it sounded great when we were talking about it around the table, but now looking at it in black and white, or things have changed since we made these decisions. So I would encourage you, instead of delaying the open house, to continue on through the process, because delaying just delays the time frame that you all get a better ordinance, that the public gets a better ordinance. So what I would say is move forward with the open house. In the meantime, you all continue to look at it. You can workshop it or just on your own. And then after the open house, we're gonna come back together and we're gonna hash it out. And we're gonna talk about, okay, what has the public brought up? Here's the big items that they're worried about. Do you wanna change those things? How do you wanna change them? Did you all see anything else that was alarming? And we can address all of those items at that time, and then you can decide, now we're comfortable with it, now let's move forward and have public hearing. And then hopefully at that point, the public comes forward and says, you listened to my comments at open house, I'm happy with it, adopt it. And you all feel comfortable at that point. We've looked at it for, at that point, 2.5 years or something like that. And, we're comfortable, we're happy to get something new and fresh and easily administratable and easy for the public to read, and then, get into adoption, send it to town council for adoption. So that's my 2 cents. I would just say, trust me, trust our process. You guys take the 2 months while it is also going to the public for them to review, would be my recommendation.
So we'd have the public, the public open house on July 25th. Doesn't mean we couldn't workshop it, but, that would be the day. If you truly postpone it, then we're probably looking at like August 29th.
But I think the idea of the workshop was not necessarily to postpone it as much as it was to break the meeting up from
everything
doing
else.
everything else.
Mhm.
Is that?
And that's fine, yeah.
And I think,
Because I don't think we want to delay it,
No.
but especially with the process being as such. But
and I think, some of the things we're gonna discuss, at least what I found and shared, I think some people will agree with, some people won't. I think there are other things that people will have, and I think we just have to come to some sort of consensus on some of the questions that people have, and then move forward with the public hearing, with the presentation. And I think the big issue for us, not necessarily for you, is make sure that everybody who has a potential interest knows it's there and has the ability to review it. One of the things for sure is, this is a big document for us to review, but, if the public was gonna look at something like this, it'll be very interesting to see what they have to say, although I suspect that what the public will do is look at the areas that impact them and then make comments on that, not so much the overall document.
Okay, so do you all then, if we're gonna stick with the 25th of July, I'll do a whole lot of Facebook and public outreach at this time. And I guess it would be this draft, because we won't have time. there won't be any time between now and then to make any changes.
Yes, I'm gonna make changes.
You-
I'm marking up, I'd like to clean up, get it looking as great as possible. There's also the illustrations, which we were gonna talk about next, if I can get the presentation up. There are more illustrations to come, and I would like to get those in so the public can see those and provide feedback on those as well. So, yes, I'm gonna quick, fast, and in a hurry, try to get that ready. We're also gonna get, a flyer that you can spread about town, get the word out about the open house, and we'll,
Well, you had mentioned don't delay it, so is July 25th enough time?
yes.
And that's, okay, all right.
Can I make it,
It, go ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
Is July 25th, would it be at our regular meeting time, or will it be earlier in the day?
That's what I'm suggesting. So we have 2 items, right now for that meeting, so I'm suggesting that we do what we've done in the past, which is push the items up, and then basically at 6 o'clock or something of that nature, that we have an actual open house.
Okay.
Just to push it after work,
Yeah.
if anybody wants to show up, but to also make sure that we are not pushing our other items
Correct.
to a different meeting.
On that same day, the Washington County Historical Society has their Jefferson and Hamilton presentation at the Barter at 7:30 PM, and the people who are interested in that are probably the people who would be interested in what we're talking about.
Awesome.
So
Well, maybe
there-
we'll get a good turnout then.
Well, no, I'm thinking it might be a conflict.
Oh, well, if this was at 6, would it be a conflict? If
Well,
that's
theirs
at
is at
7:30?
7:30, would that allow enough
Mhm.
time, you think?
Mhm.
Okay.
Can I make a quick comment on how to maybe increase public engagement? Diana, you have a pretty good feel for the hot topic
Mhm.
issues, I'm sure. It might be nice to have kind of a highlight reel, so to speak, so that something to catch people's interest instead of just saying, here's 200 some odd pages, good luck, because that's daunting for anybody.
Yeah, you could highlight
I would-
sign changes, farm
Right.
animals.
So this is
Mhm.
basically saying,
whatever.
this is how it's gonna impact you
Yeah.
in these hot button ways, and it might incentivize people to take a closer look.
Yeah, because I think people, like, short-term rentals is gonna be a hot topic.
Yeah, so there may be 5 or 6 of those, and then we should definitely show those graphics for, you're like R1 and has the little house. And that, I think most people can,
Now, for Facebook,
Yeah.
I think just the hot topics, so people know it's out there.
Mhm.
And then what you could do is say if you have questions prior to, at least you could just get people to know it's out there. I mean, a lot of people look at social media, there's that Abingdon Connect, there's, you know,
The whole draft will be posted as
Yeah.
well, not only just for that, but a requirement, so.
right.
Yeah.
Would a workshop be more beneficial after we have the initial open house?
Well, that's what, I guess that would be, I mean, we've kind of gone back and forth on that.
So right now, the schedule, we have, we've got open house, then we would have a work session to review what the public
Okay.
said, talk about anything else that you all might want to bring forward. And that can be done, I think we sent some emails, that can be done a couple of different ways. I can either send that to Mayanna and she talk about it with you all and you give her your information. And then from there, we can go to town council because we need to bring them in on this process now and get everyone caught up to speed. So it kind of depends on, we have sort of 2 more, I think, work sessions in the scope, and so it just depends on if that's 1 planning commission work session and 1 town council work session, or if we feel like there needs to be 2 town council work sessions.
I think you're gonna want 2 town council work sessions. I don't feel like, you can tell me, but it seems like there might be the need for more than 1.
I think we can do it in one.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, Well, and it's a little different, I mean, you know, these work sessions are a little more highlighted. Our work sessions have been pretty in-depth, so I don't know, based on what people responded, if it was that you looked through it and you came up with a lot of things that you think are gonna need to be changed, or if you'd rather wait until you hear what the public says and then talk about what needs to be changed. I'm really open for either.
Well, it would seem to me if each of us put our concerns in emails, and having reviewed other people's concerns, that would, to me, take care of most of what we would be doing now. I think there'll be times when there'll be disagreements. You know, my observations may not suit somebody else, but I can't imagine there'd be a ton of those. So it seems to me that we would be better off hearing from the public and then getting back.
Correct.
You know,
After that together.
I mean, that's,
Okay.
But you could move that up if you wanted to, from the 25th to one of those other dates.
I don't know
Oh,
if
okay.
we can move that up for.
I think you're gonna need that kind of time between now and the 25th to get
To
the
get
word
you
out.
all prepared, yes.
Okay, so you would like to, let's just summarize this, so we'll do the public outreach on the 25th, then we'll come back together and do another meeting as a workshop, not really, not like this, before we get to that resolution and the public hearing. Okay?
Do you have a finished date that you'd like for it to be complete?
I guess if we have that, if we do July 25th as our public outreach, I'm thinking that we would want to, at the next meeting, make a decision somewhere in mid-August to have a meeting.
Okay.
And then hopefully at that point have it, maybe we focus on August 29th, or I guess it'd be the 22nd, I think, is our meeting in August, where we would actually bring forward a resolution.
If we, yeah, I'm out of town through the 12th of August, so after that, I'd just like to be here if at all possible.
But yeah, I mean, it's not like I'm sitting out here with somebody who's desperately waiting for a project, you know? Sometimes that happens when you're updating a code of this magnitude, that people are like, you know, waiting. So I haven't had, other than the short-term rentals, which basically I've told everyone you're not allowed to do them, but hopefully pretty soon you can do them anywhere. So, so that's probably the only, have you heard anything, Gabe, like a pressing topic?
But you know, I think it's really well done because it's pretty simple.
Good.
I mean, you know, it's what, four pages maybe, short-term rentals. It's not, for somebody who owns a short-term rental, it shouldn't, they might not like some of it, but it's not burdensome.
Okay, yeah, that's what we were going for, since we now have 51 in the town limits at this point, so.
All right, does Nate have Nate?
It's a no-go unless someone's got a thumb drive.
I was gonna say, I might have one in my bag if you want me to check real quick.
We'll move along.
Okay.
Or I can bring my laptop up and let you see the nice images, the illustrations, if you want to see that. That's what I was gonna share. We do have some additional illustrations showing parking lot size, number of trees along street frontage.
I can send it between now and then.
Yeah, you could.
Yeah.
Let's just do it that, I mean,
You can send, you just emailed me the presentation,
I did.
so I can forward that when I get back
okay.
to the office.
So I will get those inserted so that they can be in the open house draft for everyone to see as well. But they're looking good. I'm happy with them. A couple of things to discuss and hash out, and it really is just a couple of things. One of those is the homestay short-term rental. And so this came about as I'm, compiling it all together and kind of going back through the old checklist to make sure things are incorporated correctly. And so I came up with this question. Okay, we still have homestay here, and I felt like I remembered some discussion that homestay was gonna go away and we were just gonna have short-term rental. And so I'm here now to get that final direction from you. Is homestay staying the way that it is in the,
No, it's not staying,
it's not staying?
no,
Okay.
No, that's what I thought, we decided just
Yeah.
short-term rentals.
Okay.
just short-term rental.
That's what I thought as well as I was looking at it, but I couldn't find that definite answer. There's, you know.
And we're, and it should be allowed in every, it should be allowed in every district at this point.
Okay, so short-term rental, I have as by right in the AFOS, the R1, R2, R3, R4, and the OI, and PUD. And then also in the residential sub-district of the Olden Historic District. Does
It
that
should
sound-
be throughout the Olden Historic District, and then also in B1, B2, and B3, because it's already allowed in B1, B2, and B3.
Okay.
It's just a special use permit right now, so. I think we all decided it would just be allowed anywhere.
Okay.
Or you all. I am just the messenger. Just the messenger here.
All right, perfect, that clears that up. The next item I'd like to talk about is the conditional zoning and proffers. The last time I was here, we had a work session downstairs, and we talked about conditional zoning and proffers, and I feel like I didn't do a very good job of explaining that. The kind of end decision from that was, just take it out. We don't like it, we're nervous about it, we have concerns about it, take it out. And I feel like I'm not doing my due diligence if I just say, okay. Because it really can be beneficial to you. It's not something that you have to use, but having it in your ordinance, it's enabling. It allows you to use it if you need to, if you want to. And so I gave you in the memo a couple of scenarios when that might be important to have this conditional zoning and proffers. That was, an applicant comes forward, they want to rezone a piece of property, they're saying they're gonna build these nice townhouses, and everyone says, that looks really great, that's great in that area, we like it, we approve it, you're approved for rezoning. Time goes by, the applicant comes back, their site plan is not townhouses, their site plan is apartments. Doesn't have the same feel, the same thoughts that you all approved and intended to be in that area. You cannot turn down that site plan if the site plan matches what it's rezoned to. You've rezoned it to R3, high density. If their site plan matches the R3, you have to approve that site plan. Unless you've had the conditional zoning and you've placed the condition that this is approved to be R3 with the condition that it's this site plan, similar to this site plan, these townhomes, etc. So that's one scenario. Another scenario is there's an application to rezone and you have concerns about traffic, or, you know, this is sort of entering at an intersection that, you know, is a little dangerous, there's already some traffic concerns here, we don't really like this. And you voice that to the applicant. The applicant can say, I hear your concerns, I agree, what if I put in a turning lane? I'll build a turning lane, make this safe, I'll even back up the homes greater than the setback, I'll do all these things to make it a better development, to make you happy with it. In this scenario, you can say, okay, is that, you know, something you're proffering? You're offering that to us? And they say, yes, I'm offering that to you, I'm gonna do that. So if you make that acceptable proffers and you say, thank you for proffering that, yes, now we will rezone it with the condition that you're going to do this turn lane, do these other things that you promised. Otherwise, someone can stand up here and promise you the sun and the moon and then never give you the sun and the moon. But if you have this in here, you can utilize that to make sure the development that is portrayed is the development that you get. And so that's why I would say keep that in there. If you are still uncomfortable with it, and you know, because it is a lot of language, we put it in there that way because it may not be used very often. And so then it makes it easier for staff to see, how does this process work? How is this, you know, are we doing this to state code? All of the language we put in there is from state code and helps with the process, helps with the steps, making sure you're legal. If you don't like all of that language, we can dial that back and just sort of enabling it by saying, oh yeah, and we can do conditional zoning and proffers per state code 15.2 dash whatever. If that's all that you want, if you don't want the full body of language. But I would recommend having something in there to protect you for future. Thoughts?
I think, although I don't know what we called them from time to time, but I think we have done that, agreed and said, okay, we'll agree to do that if you'll do this. So, I mean, to me, I think you have to have something in there, whether it's all the language. I didn't have any problem with the language that I read here, but if, you know, if it was something that would be simpler, that would be fine. But I think we have to have the opportunity to do that. I mean, one of the things I remember, and I know, Scott, you were on the commission at the time, I don't know, Kirk, if you were, when we approved some of the things that were gonna be done at the Cinema, when they were gonna build the restaurant. You remember, we said, okay, you can do that, but you have to plant trees, you have to do, you can't have a sign out at the road. There were all kinds of qualifiers that they agreed to do.
That's a little bit different, just to be clear. We still would have like PUDs and, you know, entrance corridor. There is still that ability at the site plan level. This is actually saying, let's take Jimmy Stewart's property out there on Russell Road, that big place where they tore down the buildings. That would be saying that when he came in and asked for the rezone, that he could have proffered like an intersection upgrade, or certain like access points, but it wouldn't be about the specific project.
Oh,
So,
okay.
I mean, they could, but you could still, I mean, I guess from like site plan review and entrance corridor things, you still have that capacity. So I just wanna remind you all how, I mean, I don't mean to bring back the nervousness, but the reason that you all were concerned was just that you thought that there was this potential idea that somebody could basically come in, and if they had a lot of money, could pass something through by saying we would proffer, like, you know, they would give us a lot of benefits, and then somebody else might not be allowed to have those same benefits if they didn't have the money. So there was a concern at the workshop level because it's tied to zoning rather than being tied to a specific project. Now, with the proffering, in a weird way, you're kind of locking in the project a little more. So if somebody does come to you and say, I wanna do a 12-plex townhouse, like Rebecca mentioned, and they say, I'm gonna put in all of this stuff, it does sort of lock them in so that they can't come back later and say, never mind, I wanna do an apartment building, because the underlying zoning allows me, so. But your concern overall was that somebody could come in and basically buy the zoning. But, I mean, we kinda do it with development agreements, site plan review, entrance corridor, COAs. I mean, we have kind of a lot of different places where we already kind of look for people to give us a high-quality project, so, this is just basically that at the zoning level.
Comments, questions?
What
would staff recommend in regard to her?
Well, I think that if there's something that at the state level is being allowed, I mean, I think that it is valuable to have it in our code. Now, do we need to? No, our code can be like more strict and more stringent. When it comes to a zoning change, I mean, I guess I always say that you should really look at the most intense thing that could happen on that property, because you don't know what the developer's telling you, if that's truly gonna be the project that they're proposing. So, I think there's pros and cons to it, but.
So are you saying that somebody comes in and wants to rezone something, and they're enticing us to rezone it by promising a bunch of stuff, but then they're like, and they get it, and they're like, well, now I'm just gonna do something else?
That's how it is right now. So basically, somebody
So-
comes in and they can entice you, and you say, that sounds great. And then they rezone it, and they sell the property tomorrow, and instead of doing row houses, they do an apartment building because the density allows it.
So, I always assumed if somebody did come in and say that, and you were rezoning it, it was contingent on them building that,
No.
whatever they said.
You can't control that.
So it's just,
This locks it in a little bit more.
yeah,
Seems like we need to keep that in there then.
of course,
Okay.
I don't recall anybody doing that around here, but I suppose it's quite possible.
Yeah, if you can't believe the developer, who can you believe?
No, I mean, they either
Nate's the only one behind.
they either do what they say they're gonna do, or they fold, and don't do anything. And then the land is vacant.
Yeah.
Can I ask, just to play the devil's advocate, I guess I'm the devil in this. Is there any case law or any history of towns misusing the proffering system? So in a way, basically it's a way to get lots of public goodies in exchange for leaning heavily on developers for proffers? Because I could see that as being a perverse incentive to do that.
Right, and that's why, and I think that's where a lot of our conversation went last time, that this portion of state code, where this comes from in state code, has been updated and pulled back and tightened up and loosened up because of that. When it first came out, localities were like, give me, give me, give me. I can, really stick it to you, and we're not gonna say yes unless you do X, Y, and Z, and you can, they started demanding things, and then developers said, they're making it too hard. We can't do this. It's not profitable projects anymore because they're making us pay for all of these things. So then they changed the code so that you can't demand and say, you want to do 500 houses, that's going to be X amount of dollars of impact to us. You need to pay us that amount to offset this impact for our trash collection and our water and sewer and all of those things. You can no longer do that. So it is really about you all sitting back and genuinely from the code saying, here's our concerns, health, safety, welfare. The developer can decide, okay, that's a legitimate concern, I can do this to make that better. And then you say, okay, yes, that does make it better, we're okay with this project. Or maybe someone comes in who has all of the money and they're dangling all of these carrots, and you still say, no, this feels not quite right, we don't want to require all of these things, that's not who we are, we just don't like this project and we're not going to rezone this property.
One thing I think in regard to this is, in the comprehensive plan, the last plan that we did is pretty specific about areas to be developed and areas not to be developed. And I mention that because I think, I personally think we need to put something about proffers in ordinance, but if we, and I had made a comment to you, to put that in the subdivision area, but, is that we know what should be developed and what shouldn't. And as long as we stick to that, then I don't think you're gonna have somebody come in potentially and say, okay, I wanna develop this big area that's not for development, and I'm gonna throw in X millions of dollars to get that done. If you stay within the comprehensive plan, that should take care of part of that, and then if you have an area within the ordinance which allows proffers, I think your plan keeps some of that from happening, if that makes.
That's a great point. I appreciate that point. That's exactly right. I mean, you've just updated your comprehensive plan to say where you want growth to be, where you want greater density, and so that's where you entertain the concepts of rezoning parcels. It's also why we're here even looking at this ordinance, is to make sure that it's lining up with your comprehensive plan and achieving those goals. So yes, when applications come forward, no matter how many carrots are dangled, don't take them if it doesn't match your comprehensive plan. Always fall back on your comprehensive plan.
I guess you mentioned that there could be language that was simplified. Is it possible for you to send us an example of something that was simplified that we could take a look at? Would that help anybody?
Okay, yeah, I can do that. And I honestly, it probably will just be something that says, you know, it's allowed per code, and I'll give the code is probably what that's gonna look like. But I can send that.
Is that a general statement, or is that attached in certain segments of language within particular articles and subsections, and or is that kind of just a generalized understanding that's overlaid throughout the entire document?
It would be in one place. It's gonna be in Article 3, I believe, is your, permits and applications. So it talks about, you know, all the different permits and applications that could be applied for, and it'll just be listed there to say,
Okay.
this is an option. All right, are we through conditional zoning proper? Are we done, ready to move on?
Other questions or comments or?
No good.
Okay. So then also I provided attachment C for you, which contains two maps, your overall zoning map. Big thing to note here is the overall zoning map is not changing. The districts have not changed. We've not shifted those, so that is remaining the same, no changes. Where the changes.
That was in the email, just so you all know. It's not actually in here.
It's on my screen. The map that is changing is the old and historic sub-districts. So currently, I think there's 15 sub-districts. And the very first thing that we heard, and then heard again and again throughout as we started this project and went into public engagement and talked with you all, is that it's way too many. Staff had a hard time. The public didn't understand, why does this cut on this street? And, you know, it just didn't make a lot of sense. So we have narrowed those down to 5 sub-districts: a civic and business, a residential, a artisan, the Sinking Spring Cemetery, and muster grounds. And so that map is one that you should take another look at, make sure that's appropriate, and that will also be part of this process and adoption.
And that's referred to in several areas in the text too,
Yes,
the matrices show what's available in those particular 5 areas.
yes.
And page 63 is where they're labeled out. That's something that you all kind of looked at the start, so I don't think we've changed that since
We haven't
last
changed
year.
that, but I wanted
Okay.
to bring it up again to remind everyone because it has been a while. And everyone, I think, was satisfied with it then, but just wanted to draw your attention to it.
Can I ask a question about the zoning map, and this actually is related to one of Nate's potential projects. Oddly enough, the right-of-ways are not zoned. Is there a reason, or was there ever discussion with the staff prior to me that, how that looks? Because we end up with some really big, weird, odd swaths over various areas around the, like around the railroad that are unzoned. But it's not as if they're, you know, like railroad right-of-way is still private property.
Right.
So is there any discussion that you all would actually amend the map or no?
We did not have discussion about that early on. We kind of took the shape files and, you know, used what was there. In this project, there was a small amount of, because we weren't really expecting overall zoning map changes, so the budget for changes was pretty small. If you wanted to address that, we can. We would need to see what's left in the budget and see if we can do that, or if we would need to do some type of amendment to address that issue.
Okay, it's just kind of an oddity.
Yeah.
That the zoning categories don't all abut to each other. There's like a weird gray unzoned space. And I wasn't sure if what you had gotten was like an official map versus these GIS blocks that are just kind of, yeah, they're like blocks that are pushed together, but nothing, there's not overall zoning basically for the whole town, so I just kind of wanted to make sure that in the future we don't have the right-of-way unzoned. While it may seem simple, of course, we find the one spot where we're questioning, what the situation should be, so. And
Yeah.
maybe just talk to your GIS folks and see, it might just be as simple as projecting everything out to the center line
Mhm.
of the right-of-way, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, okay. I can check on that. And that's it, other than the open house, July 25th, and we settled on 6 PM here. We will have, of course, the zoning ordinance. I'll also have some boards with the zoning map, the overlay, historic overlay districts on a map where everyone can look at it. We'll have some guides for folks who are brand new to zoning, some kind of what is zoning information and helpful guides available as well. The way the open house, the way we do it is typically I'll do a presentation that kind of runs through, here's the zoning ordinance, here's what's in each article to help people find their hot topic, find the thing that they're most interested in, and kind of review some of the major changes. And then we really open it up to open house style, let people look at boards, ask questions. So it's great that you're having on planning commission night so that you guys can be here to answer questions and hear the questions as well. And then, yeah, we just collect all of that and bring it back to you the following month.
Does it make sense that we do it downstairs then, so we have the board set up and more of an area where we can walk around and they all can talk to you, or
What we could
all of the
do,
masses of public that I'm hoping will come?
what we could do is have our regular meeting here.
Okay.
Schedule that for 6 o'clock. We
Sounds
finish,
good.
we go downstairs.
Okay.
That way, if we run a few minutes late on what we're doing, you'll be there and it won't
I like it.
do both.
Yeah, that's a great. Okay. So would we say 4 o'clock for our meeting next month then, and then, it's 2 items right now. Both of them will be special use permits, so
So what time?
4 or 5, I'm not sure what you all. 4:30?
That's
Okay.
Works for me.
All right. Set the meeting up here then at 4:30, and then I'll reserve that downstairs for 6 PM for the work session.
When do you anticipate that the draft will be out there if somebody wants to look at it?
I will turn that over to Rebecca. Hopefully a couple weeks ahead of time,
Yes.
which doesn't give you much time, but.
Right, that is our hope. And we can also, what we've done in the past is even after the open house, we'll open like a Survey Monkey link where people can go on and, type in some comments after the open house, and we usually leave that open for like a week or two after the open house so that it gives people a few more days, a little bit more time, or, if someone just saw, hey, it's an open house, and, oh yeah, I've got a question, or I wanna know, and they come to it, and then go, oh wait, I've got some reading to do, then it gives them that opportunity to do that. But I am, yes, going to have the draft cleaned up and to you at least a week in advance, hopefully more than that. But it's gonna depend on if all the illustrations are ready, and so I can't really promise 2 weeks in advance, but that's what we're gonna aim for.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? We're good?
On this same topic, I think Nate would like to talk about a piece that we didn't really fully get in here in time, but as we know, it's a living document, so. Would you like to come up and chat about it?
Jump in right now?
If you'd like.
Yeah, sure.
I think it's under the same topic.
In terms of the pocket neighborhoods?
Mhm.
Yeah. I'll be brief. And I might have miscommunicated. I was gonna go into a little bit more detail in the next workshop.
That's fine, I just wanted you, if you all.
Yeah.
So originally Nate came and we had a discussion about the, cottage neighborhoods, pocket neighborhoods. You all asked him to bring back some more information, which I brought to the last meeting. He watched it, he wasn't able to attend, and from that, the last discussion, basically it sounded like everyone was in favor of making the size of the PUDs more flexible, that you come in and ask for the size of the PUD you're interested in, and not the 3 pages of actual requirements that you were proposing.
Right.
To be quite honest, so, that's your tee up, I'm not sure.
And
where you
actually,
wanna go.
Jeff had some specific concerns. Of course, he's not here tonight, but he did have some specific concerns about that.
And I may, if anybody remembers what those concerns were, I may be able to address them now. I know, Scott, some of your questions were related to stormwater. And that's something that I would encourage there to be some sort of language, obviously, that it would just have to meet all state and local stormwater requirements.
Oh, yeah, that's, I was just, like, physically, it looks like you'd have to do it underground. And when you go underground, instead of a pond, all of a sudden your cost goes way up. And so my concern was just knowing that, can you still do the project, knowing you've got that kind of premium that you have to spend?
And it's a little, it's difficult for me because there are I have specific projects that we're interested in, but obviously I can't share those, so I'm having to use proxies. And the projects that we are looking at, the math checks out doing the stormwater.
Okay.
That we would.
It was more of a, did you take that into consideration?
Yeah, and I actually, so part of this process I've involved Matt Bundy to review the potential projects that we're looking at. I just include that as part of my due diligence, because that's a huge component. And the projects that we're looking at, again, they're still viable even with that component, because we're also, we're not having to do most of them don't require stormwater treatment. Most of it is just getting rid of the stormwater, and that's a lot less burdensome than if it was a project where we had to treat the stormwater.
Well, that's what I was thinking, you still gotta remove the phosphate according to Chesapeake Bay rules. So-
Well, what we're looking at is under the.
So you're under the footage, okay.
The threshold.
Well,
If it was over the threshold, then again, that would just be something, and we would look at potentially purchasing phosphorus credits
if those are available. There's other
Right.
avenues you can take.
Yeah, and I'm all for this
Yeah.
type of thing. I have no problem with it. I just want to make sure everybody's thought through and there's no surprise, like somebody comes in, they're like, oh gosh,
Right.
we forgot X, Y, or Z.
And it would just be incumbent upon the developer to make sure it works
Yeah.
for them
Yeah.
and for their individual project. I think I would definitely be in favor of just using the existing PUD and have you guys decide on a case-by-case basis what the square footage requirements the acreage requirements would be for that individual
See,
project.
that's, my feeling was you always could just do it under PUD.
Sure.
Because it's basically a write your own rules system.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot simpler, and I was kind of going overboard on making sure, it was something that you guys felt really comfortable with, and what I submitted was based on other ordinances that other towns have adopted. But yeah, if you want to go with the PUD, keep it simple, and I think that would definitely work. I need a review just to make sure there's nothing in there that would make any other language that would kind of contradict the core mission of what we're trying to achieve within the PUD. And I'll have time to go through that and submit those to Mayana if there is anything that would have to change other than the acreage requirement. But we can look at that in the next meeting.
And
Well,
they,
and-
oh, go
the open house, but I think
Yeah.
I'm for having it somewhat flexible, but the simpler the better.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of like my comment on the floodplain and the 19 different things that are going to be required of the administrator.
Right.
Yeah, so if you wanted to get those comments, I guess I would say let's try to include them as,
Mhm.
if we're gonna make edits to the PUD language, let's try to get those in as part of, basically at least for the public open house, and then we can get them into the document.
Certainly.
Or,
Yeah.
again, if it doesn't work out, we can always have another.
Well, I don't see any reason why I wouldn't be able to turn that around
Okay.
before then. And then as long as it's, there's no need to just decide on anything definitive right now, but I'm encouraged by the fact that it seems like this is something that y'all would support.
We also got a kick out of the location that you showed.
Yeah.
That was kind of a
That
little
was,
secret joke.
that was good.
I'm hoping. I was thinking, what is the one piece of property that will never be
Never.
developed?
Yeah.
Ever. Ever.
And you chose it.
And yeah. I know something Jeff had mentioned was that he had seen, in his, I guess what he had envisioned, that this would not be a greenfield, something that would be a greenfield development, but more of an infill development. And I think that there are opportunities for both greenfield and infill, and I think it would work in either scenario. So it doesn't have to necessarily be one or the other. I think it would work for both. Unless anybody else.
Anybody got any questions for Nate? Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, I guess the next order of business is old business matters not on the agenda. Does anybody have anything for the good of the commission that we haven't discussed?
I have a general question that some of the projects that we've approved, and I won't necessarily get into specifics, but we've approved the ability to do some projects. What kind of time frame do we have with follow-up that those things have been done? There's one specifically that was brought and is right in the middle of town, and construction is not being done very quickly, and it's.
Yeah, and Bonefire is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
is there a timeline in terms of, is that just due diligence with, is that something we're not asking specifically enough in terms of what's,
Sure, so
what your duration of expectation to
Mhm.
complete?
most things have about a year deadline for starting, so like if it was a special use permit, they have a year. So for example, at some point, a mobile home park expansion was approved at some part in town, and they came to me and said, we're ready to do it, and I said, when was that? And they're like, well, that was like 15 years ago, and I said, no, I mean, not that we wouldn't look at it again, but if there's an expiration date. So I can look up a specific project for you, especially if it was one before I was here.
Yeah.
Um,
I think.
Just from doing business, I don't know why you would not want to complete it in a timely fashion, but from a general standpoint,
Mhm.
is it not, are we not asking the right question with
Yeah.
a project that's being presented, or is it something along the lines that where we've got to be more diligent and follow up, or is it just, that just is an example that
So they have
A
not done it at all?
they've
Because I thought he bought
attempted to
everything.
do it,
He's not
but
finished.
it's not finished,
Oh,
and
okay. I've not really paid attention.
Yeah, well, when you look at the front of that building and the back of that building,
Mhm.
I know people who won't go in there because of the appearance. But that was, the approval was for the whole front,
Mhm.
and it's been way more than a year. I don't know
Okay.
how long it's been.
I can look at that one. In general, though, you can put, I mean, we're kind of talking about conditions and proffering and all of these things. I mean, you can have certain conditions that need to be met if your approval
Well,
motion is appropriate, you know.
that's the example, but I mean,
Yeah.
I guess in terms of while we're looking at those
Yeah.
particular types of projects, or are we not asking, I mean, maybe that was just something where,
Mhm. And we can kind of, I mean, maybe, I don't want to pick on you, Nate, but since you're here, you know, Nate came through with a project not too long ago to revamp the old jail, and he went through a process of going through a rezone, he went through, you know, floodplain. If he just sat on that project and didn't do anything for 5 years, his approvals, are null and void essentially. He would need to come back based on what our current requirements are. So certain things, it is a timing issue.
Doesn't the
it-
bonfire have like a building permit limit? Like,
That
I mean,
also has
that's-
a
I would
time
think
limit
that
as
would
well.
be-
Mhm.
That would,
Yep.
if you already started, that would be the control.
And I don't know the exact.
and I'm asking it more,
Yeah.
that is a
Right.
specific example. I'm simply saying, as
Mhm.
we're being presented projects, is it, what is our duty to put
Yeah.
expectations of
The Historic
definitely can.
Preservation Review Board, we've always, I don't know where it's written, but we've always told them, you have to do this within a year or you have
Mhm.
to come back.
Mhm.
And so within that district, that's what people understand.
But it's also increasing the amount of, Gabe, will you go look at this, or hey, go knock on the door and say you're not done yet. I mean,
Gabe does
what,
that a lot.
what do we do? I mean,
Something, I was just gonna say, a lot of comments I've had when I've gone through the OH projects have been they've had trouble finding craftsmen and just trades to do it. So we kind of are a little lenient if it's like a little over a year and stuff, but if it's, I don't know how long this project's been going along, but obviously there's probably like some sort of time where it's like, okay, like.
Well, he's doing it himself, and I think that's the problem.
Yeah, I know there are also guidelines or standards for when a project is considered abandoned. So if you do work up to a certain point, and then all work stops for a certain period of time, then essentially that project has been abandoned, and then at that point, you could maybe use that as a standard item that.
I mean, I just think it's also important for the commission to understand and consider that when doing a project that is front and center of
Mhm. And I've had ones where people struggled, in other places I've worked, and then they've come back, and then they've come back, and then it got to the point where the planning commission said, you have until such and such a date. If at that date it's not complete, you cannot go forward with this project. So there are ways to try to, put that into a motion, which you can start doing. I've seen that happen in places. It is tough though if somebody gets approval and then they either run out of money or they can't find somebody to do the work and so they just choose to not do it. Because you're taking something that existed in a certain way and then they're asking for something usually beyond the underlying.
I think it's just trying to
standard, so.
finding a balance between those requests that are being granted or asked for and the ability to get them done. And I think that the longer it takes, the more, I mean.
The other thing too that I think would be interesting if anybody was ever if anybody would like, is that we could post a public meeting that happens, you know, somewhere like on a bus, and then we all go around and take a look at the projects that have or haven't been completed.
Well, and I think that's the other thing is, I think we talked about having reports from the code enforcement people. There are areas of town that to me need to be addressed. And I think those just sort of falls in line, both of those things.
Yeah, and we do have, our code enforcement officer spends a lot of time right now at this part of the year on grass and shrubbery and all of that. But it is complaint based, so it does lend itself to be very interesting, which areas have a lot of complaints and then which ones don't, so. But if you'd like him to come present, I'm sure he'd be more than happy to. Maybe not on the 27th, though.
No.
We'll try not to stack too much in one meeting again, but.
Well, one other thing, I think after we get through with this, I think we ought to have at least one meeting where we have just a training session on the comp plan.
Sure, absolutely.
I mean, because I think it's, when you start to read through this, the comp plan is so important. And if people haven't read it or aren't familiar with it, it's a problem for enforcement and what we would consider future development.
I have to adjourn myself, so I don't know whatever else to do with it. I apologize. I gotta get.
All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
There you go, there's your motion.
I think so.
Yeah.
Is there a second? Yeah, there's Don, second. All in favor?
Aye.